while we are cruising through Helltides and Whispers by just right-clicking everything to death. It's very easy to forget that us Bone Spear Necromancers have to do way more than just that in a single target setting. It is incredibly important to understand our gear in terms of crit cap and lucky hit chance for optimal essence generation, as well as our combo and Bone Spear placement. For the first part of the gearing aspect, I have created a Bone Spear crit cap calculator that you guys can use. Link to this is going to be down in the description below. How do you use this? As you can see here, I'll explain it. You need to click the file, then you need to make a copy and then transfer this into your own Google Sheets document so you can start editing just 2 numbers. Everything else is going to be automatically calculated for you. Stated here above, you need to insert crit chance here that can be found normally in your character sheet on the crit section. Let's just say this would be 40. Then what you also need to input, and that's literally it, is your current essence is a maximum. And the problem here is that we need to have multiples of 30, so you always have to round down. That's why I made this little drop down here, so you can only choose multiples of 30. So let's say you have 210 maximum essence, so you click on these 210 right here, and now you are literally done with setting up the crit cap calculator. So let's say you are crit capped, then you are golden here. You could fine tune your crit chance a little bit more. So let's say you could maybe lose a little bit of like 30, maybe you can lose 2% crit on your gear somewhere, but this is more of like a theoretical breakpoint because you are not always going to have 210 essence. Why that is important, you're gonna see in the second section where we go into more detail on how important it is to stay above a certain maximum essence threshold. But this nonetheless gives you a very good introduction into the crit calculations and is just used as a theoretical tool so you can see how far you are away from effectively being crit capped. As you can see, when you put in 30, for example, then you are missing crit, as this cell is going to tell you. And then an easy way to increase that is just getting more crit chance on your gear, for example, on your hands or on your ring slots. Now that lucky hit chance part of that first section, we do have a very interesting problem to solve. Namely, our Bone Spear costs essence, but we don't want to lose out on having a lot of essence because then we're gonna deal way less damage with our multipliers, namely Ossified Essence. The more essence you have, above 50, you're gonna deal way more damage. I'm gonna go into way more detail on this in the second part of the video. But this is a very interesting problem to solve that we tackle by using exposed flesh on the ring. Now, this one is going to give us a 10% lucky hit chance to generate essence whenever we are hitting a vulnerable enemy. Luckily enough, with the splintering aspect, basically everything past that first initial target hit is gonna be permanently vulnerable because we are running splintering on all of the Bone Spear Necromancers. We can very easily solve that the first target that we are hitting with the Bone Spear is not gonna be vulnerable by using the breaking support on our Tempest, because then our Seneschal construct is going to give us that breaking support on a single target all of the time, and we actually can play the stronger upgrade here on the paranormal Bone Spear all of the time. So with Bone Spear, we are basically spending essence and then having a chance of generating that essence back with triggering exposed flesh. So the very important thing here for exposed flesh is that everything that damages a vulnerable enemy has a 10% lucky hit chance. So not only is it that your Bone Spear can do it, also the returning portion of the Bone Spear, these little bone shards, can actually trigger that as well. And then you have your standard stuff like your Bone Storm, which actually has a 40% base lucky hit chance, which is increased by your lucky hit chance on your gear. But also, what you also have is you have your Blighted Corpse Explosion that gives you another source of triggering exposed flesh over and over again increasing that essence generation by a huge amount. Since ideally every build wants to get rid of that low damage dealing generator, we can go the route of trying to trigger exposed flesh with as much lucky hit chance as possible. We do this by using lucky hit chance on the rings and primarily on our gloves, because as you can see here, I've been very lucky on these gloves. They have 16.5% lucky hit chance, and therefore all of my previously mentioned exposed flesh triggering abilities will get even more lucky hit chance, increasing our essence generation coming from exposed flesh. So since we are stacking lucky hit already and greatly increasing the lucky hit chance on all of our spells, which is further increased by stuff on the helm, for example, with lucky hit chance while we have a barrier, it is also really important to not forget about a very important stat that we can find on our offhands and on our gloves. Lucky hit up to a 5% chance to restore primary resource. You can see that's on the gloves right here, and luckily enough, Lidless Wall does also have that baked into it, and it's called Lucky Hit Essence here. So we have a 5% base chance to restore 27.7% of our essence, which is obviously very strong the more essence we have, and this can very easily already be much higher than your exposed flesh. So for example, if you have 200 essence, it's very easy to, whenever this procs, to restore 50 essence, which is basically a max rolled exposed flesh. So these two stats on the gloves and on the offhand are also really important and need to be taken care of, which is being done by stacking lucky hit chance in the first place for exposed flesh anyway. And on top of that, this season also the Seneschal construct is going to help us quite a lot. The Tempest has a speed of 0.8 seconds, and every time that is going to happen, you are going to restore 20 primary resource, which is further increased by stuff like resource generation on your rings. But this stat is not going to help you generating by itself. It is only gonna be useful if all the things I have mentioned previously are in line, and it's then gonna boost those up tremendously. So ideally, I would suggest you go to Kjovashat and you enter the training grounds whenever you are fine-tuning your build to make this perfect, because you can summon multiple or also single boss training dummies to check how your essence is gonna look like. With your Bone Spear, you can stand like this, try to hit as many targets as possible, and then you can see how your essence is gonna work out. As you can see here, on multiple targets, it should always very easily be above 75%. So you dip into all the multipliers and have a lot of leeway in terms of spending your resource. This is obviously increased when I activate my Bone Storm and have a lot of other additional sources of damage that can also trigger exposed flesh. As you can see here now, the essence spikes a little bit more because I have that much more lucky hit chance sources, namely damage, in either Bone Storm or the Blighted Corpse Explosion that you can see below the targets right now. If your multi-target essence generation looks a little bit like this, can be a little bit worse because this is a very well-tuned character already in a multi-target setting, then you are fine. During leveling, this is obviously going to be a little bit worse, but the way more important part is actually when you are changing to a single target training dummy. And this is what this complete video was inspired by. Obviously, the less targets you have, the less sources of triggering your lucky hit you will actually have. And if your single target essence generation doesn't look like mine right now, that is not a big deal during leveling, but for endgame it should come pretty close to what you can see on the screen right now, with just one or maybe even 3 sources of lucky hit. During leveling, it's therefore heavily advised to use bone splinters because your gear isn't as fine-tuned and you might have not been super lucky on getting all the pieces you need to solve this very interesting essence puzzle. Therefore, during leveling, you are going to progress through the progression setups on the Maxroll Bone Spear guide. In the chapter 4, you will have the starter, which is around 600 item power, and then as you progress through the different stages, you are gonna have way better gear, and therefore at some point you can just get rid of bone splinters. After you understand how the lucky hit essence generation engine is going to work for your build, it's now time to see how we are going to increase our single target damage, because in Whispers and in the Hell Tides it's extremely easy to just right click through everything, not having to think. But if I would do the same on a boss training dummy, you can actually see that the damage is nowhere near close where it's supposed to be. And as you can also see, the numbers are not really as high. But why is that? So we do have a lot of different multipliers that we have to take care of on the Bone Spear. The first one is gonna be Grasping Veins, and as we saw previously in the crit cap calculator, this gives us 20% critical strike chance, which is gonna be very important in hitting 100% crit cap. And if you are 100% crit capped in the crit cap calculator, then you are also having a 40% permanent multiplier, because you're permanently critting on our damage during Grasping Veins uptime. Then the next multiplier is actually on our Paragon board, and that one is Flesh Eater. After we consume 5 corpses, we also get 40% increased damage. This one is not increased critical damage, this one is actually flat onto everything. The next one is going to be Serration, and this one says that the Ossified Essence, our key passive, is also going to give us a critical strike damage bonus for our bone skills of 1% per essence above 50. So for this to always be active, we need to be at least at 90 essence all of the time, because if we dip to 98, for example, then we're gonna lose 1% of damage coming from our Serration aspect. So for now, our requirements are actually being crit capped to get all of the bonuses from the Grasping Veins, and we also need to be above 90 essence all of the time. And last but not least, basically the strongest and maybe even the best key passive in the entire game is Ossified Essence. Ossified Essence is going to give us 0.5% multiplier for each point of essence we have above 50 while casting. So you can see how important increasing our maximum essence is actually going to be. For example, the Lidless Wall, if that is a Maxroll, that one is instantly going to give you a 10% multi just by equipping it, because you will always have so much maximum essence, well, if you are at maximum essence. And this is exactly how the Ossified Essence is so complicated, because it is not going to get your maximum essence as a value, but it's going to take the current value of your essence that you have whenever you are casting your Bone Spear. And we can actually see how the Ossified Essence is dynamically adjusting the current bonus. Unfortunately, I can't show you my essence, but it's definitely going down because we now don't even have a bonus. But as soon as we are above that 50% essence threshold, our current bonus goes up tremendously. And obviously, we want to have this as high as possible every time before we are casting a Bone Spear. And now you probably also see how that first part of the lucky hit and gearing section basically plays also into your damage part, especially with the Ossified Essence node. So now you can see how interesting and complex the Bone Spear damage calculation actually is, because we have that problem of we need essence to cast our Bone Spear, but every time we cast our Bone Spear, the next one is gonna deal a lot less damage than the one before. This is where the link between that first part of the video and this second part of the video comes into place, because every time we are spending our essence, we have a chance to generate more essence, which in turn is going to increase the damage of the next Bone Spear. So this little mini game that you have to play here is what the essence generation and is what the lucky hit is about. So how do we puzzle this second section of the video together? Namely, we want to have our Bone Storm up because we need that 20% critical strike chance, and we want to have our Grasping Veins up to have even more crit chance, namely 20%, to be crit capped all of the time to increase our damage. And we want to have all the multipliers up, so namely we want to have Corpse Tendrils, we want to have Flesh Eater, we want to have the Serration because we want to be above 90 essence ideally, and we want to profit off of having as much maximum essence anyway because of the Ossified Essence. So if you are now just right-clicking the targets, we basically have none of the modifiers actually active. The only one here is the Serration because we have more than 90 maximum essence, and the other one is the Ossified Essence that is also boosting our damage. As you can see, the numbers here are not really high. We aren't even hitting 1 million. But as soon as we start using our big combo with the Bone Storms and the Corpse Tendrils, we now see way more numbers in the first place and also way bigger numbers in total. And now, if we also mix the Flesh Eater into the mix by activating Corpse Explosion 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Corpse Tendrils, now we're actually doing a lot of damage. There you can see it's almost everything is above 1 million, especially those first couple hits of the Bone Spear, and all of the little damage essences are all these shards that are coming back. So what you're going to do, especially on single target encounters, is the combination of doing 1, 2, 3, 4 Flesh Eater procs with your Corpse Explosion. As you can see here, whenever we are gonna proc the next Corpse Explosion, we get that 40% multi all the time. When you are at 4 Corpse Explosions, you use your Corpse Tendrils, you activate your Bone Storm, you trigger the Flesh Eater by pressing that last Corpse Explosion, and now you're dealing a lot of damage. But obviously, the 6-second window that we get from Grasping Veins is going to fall off. During that time of not having your Grasping Veins, you are obviously gonna deal a little bit less damage. But stuff like Varshan and Grigoire will already be dead. Duriel, on the other hand, will take maybe like 2 or 3 rotations of this Corpse Tendrils stuff. That's how you actually deal the damage on the single target. You can't just hold down right click because you need to have 1, 2, 3, 4 of your Flesh Eater passives. It's currently not visible here. There it is. Then when you are at 4, that's why I always count in my head when I want to start bursting. Then you go, okay, you have done 4 Corpse Explosions. Now it's time to press Corpse Tendrils, activate Bone Storm, and get that last Flesh Eater proc. And now is the time where we deal most of our damage. This is also, for example, why I don't like the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul, because we are always gonna have the Flesh Eater up in very weird times where I don't even have my Grasping Veins up, for example. As you can see, I'm not even running it because I want to be responsible and have the control over when I have my Flesh Eater buff. Last but not least, for number 3 is actually your Bone Spear placement. Ideally, you would want to have your enemy very close to a wall so that your returning bone shards are all going to hit the target, because you actually deal most of your damage with the returning portion of your bone spear. Now you can easily spot this when I'm shooting the Bone Spear the first time through the target and I'm dealing 162k here, for example, and then the returning portion is going to be a third of that because we're shooting 3 of them back. Now, why does this deal more damage? As you can see here on Paranormal Bone Spear, whenever we are critically striking with that first damage instance, we're gonna get 2 additional bone shards, which can also crit, and therefore instead of having only 3 of the shards that are basically the same damage as that first Bone Spear, we now have 5, so we do have even more damage on the returning portion of the Bone Spear, and we will have 100% critical strike chance, so also 100% chance of firing 5 of these bone shards back all the time during our burst window because we are crit capped. So the worst thing we could actually do would be standing very close to the target and shooting away from a wall, because as you can see here, the damage that is returning is basically just 1 bone shard, and we are missing a lot of the other shards that would increase our damage tremendously. So if this is the worst case, I'm sure you can imagine that this is gonna be one of the best cases, because now you're firing at a wall and you're hitting with a lot of your bone shards into the target. Now, you not always have a wall to do this with. So the other best looking scenarios actually being very max range, because your Bone Spear has a max range and then it always explodes in the little shards that are returning. So if you trigger that without a wall by being max range and the explosion being just a tiny bit behind the target, this is going to guarantee that all the bone shards are going to hit the target, no matter if you are shooting at a wall or if you are at max range. Obviously, when you go very close and you are lucky to have a wall where you can bounce the bone shards off, that is going to be really important and also a lot more damage. Usually you can Corpse Tendrils them very close to a wall, for example, or Varshan charges to a wall, and then they basically have triggered your trap card, because now you can ricochet all of your bone shards off of that wall, guaranteeing that the bigger portion of your damage will always find its target. I hope I was able to explain this very complicated unholy trifecta, as I like to call it, between your gear, your combo, and also your Bone Spear placement. If you have any questions to this video or want to see this live in action, I suggest you check out the Twitch link that is going to be linked down in the description and also in the pinned comment below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.